Do you think that your silence means the narcissist will quickly forget you and move on to a new supply? Think again. Silence isn't the end. It's the most powerful strike you've ever made in that toxic relationship. Every day you don't speak, don't react, is another day they feel their control slipping away. And that's exactly when their psychological game starts to unravel. In today's video, we'll uncover the full truth behind your silence, from their hidden obsession, their subtle stalking tactics, to the ego collapse that keeps them thinking about you non-stop. If you've ever been trapped in an emotionally manipulative relationship or are trying to break free, watch this video all the way to the end. And don't forget to hit subscribe so you never miss content that helps you reclaim your emotional power and inner freedom from the very people who once believed they owned you forever. What the narcissist fears the most isn't your anger, it's your genuine indifference. It's when they no longer know what you're thinking, feeling, or doing. It's when you stop sending long texts, trying to explain yourself, when you no longer argue to defend your truth, and when you refuse to react to their familiar emotional traps. To them, your silence isn't a void, it's a collapse. Every moment you don't respond is another second they lose the fuel that once fed their distorted ego. You might think they've moved on, that their dazzling social media posts, calm smiles, and happy pictures with someone new are real. But the truth is far from that. Inside, they're in chaos. They quietly watch you. They study every word you write, every smile you share, every absence you create. They are not at peace. They are not happy. They are grappling with the reality that they no longer control you, the very supply that once gave them a sense of worth. And then the coincidences start to appear. A vague message, a sudden comment, a mutual friend who randomly brings up their name. None of it is accidental. These are Hooks tests. They need to know, do you still belong to them? If you react, whether with anger, sadness, or suspicion, they'll latch on immediately. But if you stay silent, grounded, and refuse to give even a flicker of emotional response, that's when the obsession begins to spiral. Your true peace is something they can't comprehend. They begin rewriting the narrative, convincing themselves you're pretending, that you haven't truly forgotten them, that you're still performing. They invent, distort, and color a version of reality, not because they want to understand you, but because they cannot accept the truth that you've slipped from their grasp. That you're no longer bound by guilt or a misplaced duty to heal someone who never wanted to change. What sends them into panic isn't you loving someone else, it's you loving yourself. It's the fact that you can wake up each day without needing their validation. That you smile not to be noticed, but because you feel light again. That you live without their presence. And to a narcissist, not existing in your emotional world means they are nothing at all. When a narcissist realizes their old tactics no longer work, they don't disappear, they evolve. They become quieter, more subtle, and far more dangerous. They no longer charge at you with dramatic apologies or sudden promises of change. Instead, they sneak through the cracks, empathy, pity, a sense of responsibility. They speak of loneliness. They say they're healing, that no one understood them like you did. They don't want to get back together, they just want to talk. But be careful. This isn't remorse. This is a test to see if your heart still has a soft corner they can occupy. And if you let your guard down even slightly, they will return. Not as a remorseful ex, but as a manipulator who just found the switch again. They won't forgive your silence. They won't forget that you walked away without begging, without explaining. Because in their mind, you weren't supposed to do that. You were supposed to suffer. You were supposed to regret. You were supposed to need them. But you don't need them anymore. And that is their real nightmare. They will keep watching you in silence. They won't like, won't comment, but they'll read every post, watch every story you share. They'll analyze your smile, scrutinize the person standing next to you, even save the moments they can't emotionally handle, all just to maintain the illusion that you haven't fully let go. They'll tell themselves you're acting, that you're just trying to seem happy, that the new person in your life is only a temporary replacement. But the truth is, you're not acting anymore. You're living, breathing, taking steps away from a place that once bound your soul in fear and self-doubt. Your rebirth isn't loud. It doesn't need announcements. It doesn't seek validation. And that's exactly what haunts them most. You're not bitter. You're not seeking revenge. You've simply disappeared from their emotional universe with strength, serenity, and finality. And that not an angry post, not a new lover, is what truly shatters the manipulative system they spent so long constructing. Because in the moment you stopped being a loving puppet and became a self-governing soul, they didn't just lose you, they lost the distorted mirror that once made them feel powerful. When silence becomes fire. The quiet collapse of a manipulator. The silence you've chosen isn't a passive reaction, it's a deliberate revolutionary act. Because in the narcissist's world, nothing is more terrifying than an awakened supply. They were used to your explanations, your apologies, your efforts to mend what they kept breaking. They were used to you being the one who held on, the one who forgave, the one who wouldn't let go. But now you don't need to say anything. And because they can no longer hear your voice, they're forced to hear their own, a chaotic void filled with confusion and nothing left to hold on to. At first, they pretend to be unaffected, like someone who has moved on. They post smiling pictures, flaunt their new relationship speak in wise quotes about letting go and growth. But don't be fooled by the mask. Beneath it is a mind crumbling piece by piece, because they know one thing: this time, you're not coming back. When a narcissist loses control, they don't surrender, they adapt. They begin to use the one thing they know best: memories and emotions. They bring up the past, not to reminisce, but to trigger. A song that used to be yours suddenly plays in their story. A once private phrase is recycled, layered over images of their so-called new life. Not because they love you, but because they want to know if they still affect you. And if you react, they'll know you're still within reach. Just one accidental view of their story. One vague melancholic status. One impulsive like on their post, and they'll leap back in with their old confident smirk, "I still have influence." But this time, you don't react. You've moved past the stage where your worth depends on being seen through someone else's eyes. You no longer crave hollow apologies or a hug patched together with lies, and in that moment, they are left with nothing except their obsession. They no longer watch you out of love, but because they can't bear the loss of control. You don't reply to their messages. You don't answer vague questions like, "How have you been?" or "Do you still think about those days?" You don't post cryptic statuses hinting at sadness. You don't write about someone who used to be. You leave no trace. You vanish as if they never had the privilege of existing in your life. And that drives them mad. And you know what? Your silence is the loudest scream. It shatters their entire psychological framework. To a narcissist, it was never about love, it was about influence. And when they can no longer influence you, it feels like you're exposing the void inside their soul. You, the one who once loved unconditionally, who forgave endlessly, now make them feel irrelevant. When you stop needing to prove anything, you become the one in power. The irony is, the quieter you are, the louder your presence becomes in their mind. But you're no longer the past version of yourself, weak, waiting, tormented. You are now someone they can't decode, a person with boundaries, inner worth, and the ability to thrive without needing to be seen. This is when they shift to redefining you not through understanding, but through smearing. To others, you become the cold one, heartless, pretending to be strong, too difficult to love, all in an effort to protect one lie that they weren't left behind, that they were the ones who chose to let go. But you don't need to argue, because the truth doesn't require belief to exist. You stay silent, you don't explain, you keep living. And that life is the strongest proof that you're no longer trapped in their emotional games. When the narcissist loses the script and you rewrite the story, The narcissist doesn't fear your hatred. Hatred, after all, is still a form of attachment. What they fear is your non-existence, that they are no longer the main character in your inner world, no longer the reason behind your tears, no longer the cause of your sleepless nights. You don't scream, you don't grieve, you don't hate. You simply aren't there anymore. And in the movie they directed, you walked off stage without a farewell. To them, it's not an ending, it's betrayal. You were once the star, the light, the validator of a warped ego that couldn't look in the mirror alone. You once reacted. You clung on. You forgave past the point of reason, and they assumed you would always be there, a home to return to. But there was no reunion scene, no tears of regret, no dramatic goodbye. Just you walking away quietly as if no real love had ever been offered in return. When the old script no longer works, they panic. They rewrite. But this time, it's not for you, it's for the audience around them. The people they spin tales for with lines like, "I tried everything. I was the one who was hurt. She left without a word." They paint a distorted version of you not because it's true, but because they can't bear to face the truth. They lost something irreplaceable, and so you become something they will never comprehend. Someone who doesn't need to scream to prove their worth. Someone who doesn't need to perform pain to gain empathy. Someone who can walk away with dignity and self-respect without demanding an apology. That more than anything is what unravels them. You don't react because you've risen above the pain. People often mistake silence for weakness. But your silence is not the voicelessness of a victim. It is the conscious choice of a survivor. Your silence is a boundary, a declaration, a final bell toll that ends the era where manipulation was mislabeled as love. And now they begin monitoring, quietly, without noise. A few accidental sightings near places you frequent. A story you know for sure they viewed. A strange account that keeps lurking around your photos. They're still searching for signals, anything to prove you're still affected. But you're not. Because you've learned one vital truth: sometimes reacting is not a sign of strength, it's the trap. You understand now that even the slightest response can pull you back into the cycle of manipulation. A vague question from them. How have you been used to keep you up for hours overthinking? A cryptic social media post once left you breathless, but not anymore. Now you know that every time you hold your silence, you reclaim ownership of your inner world. The narcissist begins to fear not because they've lost you, but because they've lost the ability to make you fear losing them. They fear you might love someone else, not out of jealousy, but because it proves you can truly be happy without them. They fear you thriving because it exposes the truth that they were the one who caused the harm, not the one who was harmed. They fear your happiness because it means they are no longer the center of your universe. And that fear is not gentle. It haunts them in every moment they scroll through social media. They see your smile and realize it's no longer a mask. Your stillness is no longer forced. You're truly living, not acting, not retaliating, not trying to make anyone jealous. And it is that pure, quiet freedom that kills them bit by bit. They try to bring your name up in conversations with mutual friends. They post subtle reflections about past relationships. They try to showcase how they're moving on. But the truth is, they're not moving on. They're desperately clinging to their existence in your memory. Because for a narcissist, being forgotten is the cruelest form of annihilation. Silent resurrection, when you are loved the right way and the manipulator truly collapses. This is no longer the story of you running from pain. No more nights of silent tears. No more internal battles between heart and mind. No more messages written and deleted. Now this is a story of return not to them, but to yourself. For the first time in a long time, you laugh without guilt. You sleep deeply without restless dreams. You don't reach for your phone at 2 a.m. You don't wonder, do they still think of me? Was I ever enough? Your mind quiets. And in that silence, something miraculous happens. You begin to hear your own voice again. You rediscover the little things that once brought you joy, a forgotten book, an old song, a simple hobby. You reconnect with friends, with family, with the version of yourself that had been squeezed into the mold of someone who never truly loved you. You breathe, you live, and you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. Meanwhile, the narcissist starts to spiral into emotional paralysis. They can't understand why you haven't returned, why you don't get jealous when they flaunt a new relationship, why you don't rage when they spread false rumors, why you don't fight back like they expect. Because in their world, every relationship is a power game, and if you're not playing, they don't know what to do. Your silence is no longer just a retreat. It's a total rejection of the role they once forced upon you. You are no longer the healer, no longer the forgiver, no longer the one who must sacrifice to prove love. And when you refuse to play any of those roles, they lose their entire justification for being part of your life. But what haunts them the most isn't that you're doing well. It's that you're being loved truly, deeply, and rightly in a way they never could. You didn't rush into a new relationship just to fill a void. You've spent enough time alone to no longer fear solitude. And when love came again, it didn't arrive like some magical fix. It came as a quiet affirmation that you are worthy of someone who sees all of you, your scars and your light, and still chooses to stay. This new person doesn't need you to shrink so they can shine. They don't silence your voice just to keep the peace. They don't play games, pull you close just to push you away, love you just to punish you. They are simply there with patience and kindness. And the first time you feel peace instead of anxiety and love, you realize real love doesn't hurt. And that's when the narcissist truly begins to collapse. They see you with someone else. You're not flaunting. You're not forcing yourself to seem happy. You're just living in your truth. They will mock. They will belittle. They will try to smear the new person. But deep down, they know they've lost you for good. Because the love you receive now isn't just from someone else. It's the love you've finally given to yourself. And once you love yourself the right way, no one can manipulate you again. The silent revenge. When your peace becomes the deepest cut to their ego. There are no insults, no social media exposés, no teary final messages. You simply disappear. Not to hurt them, but to save yourself. And that quiet disappearance becomes the loudest thunderstrike to the narcissist's ego. To them, you were never a whole person, just a function. Someone to admire them. Someone to suffer so they could feel superior. Someone too sensitive so they could always place the blame on you. But now, as you live in your authentic worth, as you stop playing the role, they no longer recognize who you are. And that loss of definition makes them feel powerless. Narcissists cannot exist without an audience. They need someone to act alongside them. And when you stop watching, stop responding, stop participating, their stage goes dark. No spotlight, no applause, no script. And for the first time, they're forced to face themselves. But they don't know how to do that. Because facing themselves means confronting the bottomless void inside the place that should have been filled with self-worth, integrity, and real love. But instead, it's been overrun by illusions of control, hunger for validation, and a fear of abandonment. So they try to come back, not with sincere apologies, but with the calculated disguise of a seasoned manipulator. They know you have a heart. They target your kindness, your empathy, your desire for a peaceful ending. They say they miss you. They say they've realized everything. They say they're changing. But you know this. If they had truly changed, they wouldn't need to come back for your validation. You understand now that not all pain needs to be resolved through a conversation. Some wounds can only heal by walking away and not looking back. And that truth, when lived out in silence, becomes the deepest form of revenge you've ever enacted. Not because it targets them, but because it strikes directly at the illusion of power they once built on the foundation of your suffering. They see that you don't talk about them anymore, that you don't need closure, that you're not trying to prove you're happy. You don't need to glow just to make them regret. You simply live authentically, and that alone is more than enough to make them crumble from the inside out. They try everything. They use others to get your attention. They post curated images to provoke you. They exploit the fear of being replaced to bait a reaction. But none of it works anymore, because someone who has broken free from manipulation no longer reacts to cheap tricks. And in that exact moment, the greatest truth crashes down on them. They never made you happy. They only kept you attached through pain. And now that you've escaped that pain, you are no longer a source. You are someone completely, irrevocably free. And that freedom, that uncontrollable, unshakable, unpossessable light, is the very thing they crave with madness, but will never touch again. You don't need to defeat them. You just need to no longer belong to them. The truth that sets you free isn't that you're better than them, stronger, wiser, or happier. The truth that liberates you is that you no longer need to prove anything at all. That is the deepest shift in the healing journey after leaving a narcissist. You don't need to win, you just need to stop belonging to them. Because winning is a concept born inside the narcissist's world. In their reality, every relationship is a battle where one holds power and the other bows. And if you're still trying to win, you're still in their game, still orbiting around them, still measuring your freedom by their reaction. But you've stepped out of that game now, haven't you? You no longer hope for an apology. You no longer wait for acknowledgement. You don't need closure to move on. Because you understand now, not every wound needs to be healed by the one who caused it. Some wounds need only you. They need time. They need the quiet acceptance of this truth: I was once in pain, but I'm still here, and I still deserve love. They will continue performing. They'll say things that make others believe you were the one who abandoned, the one who changed, the one who didn't value love. But you don't need to defend yourself. You don't need to reclaim your honor, because someone who's walked out of the prison doesn't need to return to explain to the guards why they're no longer inside. You are living a life they can no longer touch. You begin doing small things that mean everything: waking up without anxiety, sitting in a cafe without scanning the room for surprises, writing your thoughts without triple-checking who might misunderstand. And most of all, you smile. Not because you want to be loved, but because you are finally in love with yourself. The narcissist cannot comprehend this. They can't understand how someone could rise after their blow without seeking revenge. No screaming, no retaliation, no bitterness. They thought you would stay wounded, forever haunted, forever trying to come back if only to hear an apology. But you no longer need an apology, because you've already forgiven yourself for loving the wrong person, for giving too much, for enduring for far too long. And you know what? That's the one thing they will never be able to do. Narcissists cannot forgive themselves, because they cannot face their own wrongdoing. They cannot acknowledge the damage they've caused. And that is why they live in a never-ending cycle, always needing someone else to reflect them, to validate them, to make them feel real. But you've taken the mirror away. You no longer reflect them. And in that moment, they fade from your reality like an illusion deprived of the light it needs to exist. You don't need them anymore, not because you hate them, but because you no longer belong to the world they represent. You belong somewhere else, a place of growth, compassion, and inner stillness. A place where love doesn't come with control, where sensitivity isn't a burden, but a gift, where silence isn't a weapon, but the choice of a soul that has found peace within itself. Choosing to live. When you stop reacting and start living from within. Living in reaction is one form of survival. You react to their coldness. You react to their fake compliments. You react to the long silences. You react to longing, to regret, to their disappearing and reappearing as if your heart were just a door they could walk through at will. And in all those reactions, you thought you were living. But in truth, You were being lived. Now, you choose to live. Not to prove you're okay. Not to make them regret. Not to get revenge through happiness. You choose to live because you finally understand every day you spend reacting to them is another day you still belong to them. And from the moment you realize that you begin building a life no longer rooted in lack, no longer born from wounds, no longer searching for someone to fix your heart, you begin clearing out your inner space, one drawer at a time, and returning to yourself the things you once left behind. Your trust, your gentleness, your unfiltered laughter, free from judgment. You no longer ask, how do I avoid getting hurt again? Instead, you ask, how can I be fully unapologetically myself? That is a profound transformation, because you're no longer afraid of pain, you simply no longer allow it to come from people who don't deserve access to your soul. And then you realize real love doesn't make you shrink. It doesn't make you censor yourself. It doesn't keep you on edge. It doesn't turn you into someone constantly guessing which version of them you'll get today. Real love is a home, not flashy, but safe. Not loud, but deep. And if it ever brings you to tears, it's only because you're moved by the simplicity and purity of something you never thought you deserved. You no longer compare the new person to the old one. You don't need to, because you don't live in that memory anymore. It's still there like a chapter you once read, full of tears, full of ache, but no longer something you flip back to, relive. It's just a lesson now, a reminder, a milestone in your growth. And you're in a new chapter, one you're writing with your own hands. No director pulling strings backstage. You don't need an audience. You don't need validation. You don't live to be seen. You live to feel yourself. As for the narcissist, they're still looking for you in other faces, still thinking about you, not out of love, but from an obsession they can't explain. How could someone I once had in the palm of my hand disappear so completely? And what they don't understand is, you didn't disappear. You came home to yourself, and in that return, you don't need anyone's agreement. You don't need anyone's approval. Because you know peace doesn't need applause, no closure, no response. You are the final chapter they will never get to read. You once thought you needed an explanation, one last conversation, a kind goodbye, a proper ending with a period placed in the right spot. But then you realize the ones who hurt you were never meant to be the ones who heal you. They can't be the last chapter because they never wrote their part with real love. You searched for closure like searching for a door to shut just so you could walk away in peace. But sometimes stories don't end with a door slamming, they end with the sound of you no longer needing to look back. No longer scanning the crowd for them, no longer trying to understand why, no longer asking, was it my fault? And that's when you know you've closed the book, not with anger, but with clarity, the narcissist. They'll still say you changed. They'll tell someone you played the victim, that you didn't know how to love, that you were fake. But you no longer need to correct their stories, because you know those who need to know the truth will feel it in your presence, not in your defense. You were once the page they read over and over, not out of reverence, but because they needed control. But now, you are the final chapter they'll never get to read. You are the story they can't comprehend. The plot twist they never saw coming. The ending they no longer have the power to rewrite. And that realization drives them into chaos. They can't repeat the cycle with you. They can't reset the roles. They can't control your emotions anymore. You don't react. You don't fear. You no longer feel the need to explain who you are. You simply stay silent and keep living. Your life now doesn't need to be flashy. It doesn't need to look strong. It is gentle. It is real. It has its tired days, but no longer relationships that drain you to the bone. It has lonely nights, but no longer anyone making you feel like you're not enough. It is simple, but it is yours. You don't need to fall in love right away. But when love comes, you will greet it with open, awakened eyes. You won't give your heart just to play a role. You won't love to be seen, because you already see yourself and them. They'll keep living in old roles, keep seeking new supply, keep scripting new dramas. But no one will ever be quite like you, because you were once the mirror that reflected back the parts of themselves they refused to face, and you've taken that mirror away. No hatred, no regret, no need to look back to see how they're doing. You know the truth. They can change their image, change partners, change circumstances, but they won't change their core. And you no longer need anything from that core. You are the one who walked through the storm without being rescued. You are the one who stood back up after being knocked down by the very person you loved. You are the one who relearned how to love not someone else, but yourself. And to the narcissist, that is the cruelest truth of all, because it is the one thing they will never be able to do. You didn't lose, you just finally started truly living. If you've made it to the very end of this video, I believe it's not by accident. Maybe you've sat alone in the dark, hand on your chest, wondering, why does love hurt this much? Maybe you've thought you were weak because you still haven't been able to forget them. Or maybe you're still there, not crying anymore, but not quite smiling yet either. Wherever you are on your journey, let me say this: you didn't lose. Because those who dare to love, to trust, to forgive, they are never losers. You simply loved the wrong person. And now it's time to learn how to love the right way, starting with yourself. You don't have to be strong the way the world expects. You don't have to pretend you're over it. You don't need to succeed just to prove to the person who hurt you that you're fine. The only thing you need and absolutely deserve is a life no longer controlled, no longer lived in fear of abandonment, and no longer requiring you to sacrifice your self-worth just to keep a relationship alive. The narcissist may never apologize. They may still watch you from afar, still twist stories to preserve the illusion that you still belong to them. But the truth is, you've already broken free. And more importantly, you've realized you don't need them to heal. From now on, you no longer live to be seen, understood, or accepted by someone who was never truly capable of doing so. You live for you with every small step, every peaceful night's sleep, every unforced laugh. If these words made you feel seen or simply less alone, hit subscribe. Here, you don't have to be perfect, you don't have to be happy all the time, and you definitely don't have to pretend you've forgotten. Here, you get to be yourself. And in this journey back to who you are, you will never have to walk alone. Believe this, you deserve a love that is gentle, honest, and never hurts you just to keep you. And one day you'll remember the past without pain, because you'll know it was the path that led you to the strong, wise, and beautiful soul you are becoming today. We don't need a perfect ending to begin again. We just need one decision: never go back to the place where you once lost yourself.